this common sense position that this is just, well, this was impossible to begin with. You saw that happen in Iraq to some extent, and you're beginning to see it happen in Afghanistan. I mean, years ago, 2006, 2007, I was writing about this for The Nation, about the total lack of any capacity or any validity or legitimacy in the Afghan state. So let's begin with that, since that's key to counterinsurgency. You know, it's discussed in, well, how many soldiers will they have? Blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, you know, Richard Holbrooke said it yesterday or the day before in an interview with the FT. And it's like, how do you create a police force where there's 90% illiteracy in the society? How do police read IDs? You know, so there's hardly any capacity in the society because of a history we can get into. You know, a history of underdevelopment, a history of war that the U.S. helped fund the destruction of Afghan society, which is, you know, through Pakistan, is now reaping the whirlwind of that. But moving from the police to other institutions in the Afghan society, ministries bribe each other. First of all, the Afghan state has like 32 overlapping ministries. The briefs of these ministries aren't even clear. There are more people work for the media sort of branch of the government. What do they call it? The Ministry of Information, maybe, than work for the BBC, or like roughly about the same amount. And the BBC is the largest media organization in the world. So first of all, these people don't work. Many of them don't exist. It's like sinecures. People are, you know, it's just this payroll that exists to get money from donors. The Afghan state receives 95% of its income from international aid. The other 5% it collects as tariffs from land traffic at the borders. So it's a total kleptocracy and totally incapable of doing anything. Ministries bribe each other to get things done. A story I may have told some of you guys before, one of these events is a good friend of mine worked for the Ministry of Women's Affairs, and they wanted to get license plates for their vehicles, because if they didn't have license plates, then of course they'd be shaken down by cops. And they'd be shaken down by cops anyway at checkpoints, but if they had license plates, the shakedown would be a little less arduous. So they went to the Ministry of Transportation. The Ministry of Transportation demanded bribes, and they said, well, you know, we don't really know how we're supposed to handle the paperwork for that, like bribe to the Ministry of Transportation from the Ministry of Women's Affairs. Like, and so there was this deadlock for months. There were no license plates. So that's just, you know, that's how the Afghan state works. So it's impossible that that institution is going to be able to stand up and, you know, fight the Taliban. And it has, as a result of being a kleptocracy, you know, people like police officers pay to get their jobs, not so they can have the $50 or $80 a month wage that comes with it, but so they can have the right to shake people down for bribes. Judges are constantly bribing people. So the state has become this parasite on the society, and people resent it and hate it, and it has no legitimacy. And so if they're Pashtun in the south, they tend to gravitate towards the Taliban increasingly. So understanding Afghanistan and the U.S. role there also involves understanding Afghanistan in its own terms. And one of the key divisions in Afghan society is the North versus the South. The South is dominated by the largest ethnic group, the majority minority, the Pashtun, who make up about 42% of the population. The Pashtun also live on the other side of the border in Pakistan and become crucial in understanding the relationship between Afghanistan and Pakistan. In the north of Afghanistan live the Tajik, the Hazara. The Tajik are the second largest ethnic group with about 25 or 6%. The Hazara, who are a Shiite minority and of East Asian origin and are hated by everyone, one, because they look distinctly more Asian than Pashtuns and Tajiks, and most of all because they're Shia in this Sunni society, and Uzbeks and others in the north. And Afghanistan has always been ruled by Pashtuns, and the other ethnic groups in the north resent this domination. The Pashtun in the south see the current government, even though it's headed by a Pashtun, Karzai, as being fundamentally Tajik-dominated, which it is in many ways. And so there's a deep antagonism there. There's also a contradiction between the cities of Afghanistan and the countryside. For 100 years, Kabul has been attempting to exert its writ over the rest of the country. The Iron Emir, who in 1893 signed the Durand Line, the treaty with British India that drew the current border, which was supposed to be a temporary treaty according to him, but became the permanent border between Afghanistan and what was British India and is now Pakistan. In it, Afghanistan lost a lot of territory to what is now Pakistan. He was the first to sort of try and create a modern state. The project doesn't really take coherence until 1919 with King Amanullah, who's known as the Red Prince. Also, he was a real modernizer. And after World War I, the British were weakened enough for the Afghans to push them out. And Amanullah began imposing law and order, trying to expand public education, and following in many ways the model of Ataturk in Turkey and Reza Shah in Iran, trying to cobble together these mountainous, tribal, underdeveloped societies into a modern nation state. And that was often a very bloody, brutal, unfair process. And Amanullah provoked a tribal rebellion in the south among rural Pashtuns in the process of this in 1920. It sort of began in 27, and he was out of there by 29. And the issue was the schooling of young women. And the issue between Kabul and the countryside is essentially the middle classes, the professional classes in these cities, which are not that large a portion of the population compared to the country at large, and the royal family, have wanted to create a modern state. The landlord class in the countryside and the imams who support them are amenable to certain elements of that project. They're okay with roads, they're okay with electricity, but they don't want to give up control of the roads. If they want to stop and tax traffic, that's what they want to do. They're fine with the road being paved, but they don't want to give it away to the state. And they don't want their women to be educated, and they don't want to pay taxes and be told what to do by the central government. They don't want to be prevented from meting out justice, and they don't want to have to receive justice from a central organized state. So this is again and again provoked rebellion. And that set of dynamics exists today, the North versus the South, and also the city versus the countryside. You have in the cities a lot of people who supported the king, who fell in a coup in 73 to a Republican nationalist named Daoud, who then fell in 78 to communists, a communist coup, which a year later in 79 was followed up by the Russian invasion. There are people in Kabul today who still sort of support this Western-backed project, who supported the king, they supported Daoud, they supported the communists, they supported the Russian invasion. Their whole ideological position is, does that ideology come with electricity? Is that the one that's going to extend the rule of law over the highway so that I can drive on a paved road to Kandahar or to Jalalabad? If so, that's what we want. We want to be like